So it's like 1 billion degrees outside. It's the hottest day since when? And instead of being outside, I'm stuck in a box in 2013. Why? Well, it's because... Why is it again? I'm going to be honest with you, the reason that I'm reviewing this retro box now is because a couple of weeks ago I asked the lads in the office what I should be reviewing, and it turns out that this is one of the most searched for cars on HonestJohn.co.uk. I was kind of hoping it would be a Rolls Royce. True story, the weirdos. I'm just kidding. This thing is actually quite good though, really. Like, not exciting to drive good, or styling good, or refinement good, or interior quality good, but good like... I'm just kidding. Again. You know, there is going to be quite a lot of this japery throughout this whole thing as I try desperately to entertain you and myself while reviewing this old car. Although it is still on sale, and there's nothing wrong with reviewing something that you can still buy new. Okay? Look, let's just start again and I'll explain what this is. So the SX4 here is a crossover. Always has been. Sadly, the first one, back in 2006, was born at the same time as a little known car called the Nissan Qashqai, which, thanks to Nissan's huge marketing budget, went on to become the first crossover. It went straight into mass consciousness because Nissan managed to convince us that it had invented a revolutionary new genre of car.
Nissan invented the urban crossover.
But had it? Really? The 2006 SX4 was a slightly tall hatchback with front-wheel drive that looked a little bit like an SUV. The definition of a crossover. History will show, actually it's shown already, that the Qashqai instigated a seismic shift in European buying habits. But it didn't invent anything really. There were other crossovers by definition long before 2006. If you want to show everybody how clever you are, feel free to name some of them in the comments below. This Qashqai thing is very much like the rap metal genre, aka crossover music, where the Nissan is Rage Against the Machine. You see, the Rage's eponymous debut album popularised rap metal to the extent that some people believe that it spawned the genre, even though it clearly did not. Rap metal was a thing way before middle class kids were annoying their parents with I won't do what you tell me! I won't do what you tell me! I won't do what...
Street hustler comes up to me one day and I'm walking down the street minding my own business.
See? Where was I? Oh yeah, reviewing a car. So what I'm getting at, very slowly, is that back in 2006, Nissan and Suzuki basically did the same thing. So how come Nissan got all the credit? Well, it was because Nissan did it much better than everybody else, frankly. You see, the Qashqai has always felt more like a hatchback, as in a refined, comfortable car that just happens to be a bit fatter and ride a bit taller than other hatchbacks. Ergo, giving you additional space and a feeling of lofty safety. The 2006 SX4, by contrast, felt a little bit less sophisticated, to put it kindly. Having said that, and having said all of the slightly mean stuff about this car earlier too, this newer one, new for 2013, so is a lot better. Suzuki has clearly looked at the Qashqai closely and the dozens of other crossovers that have followed it and upped the SX4's game. For a start, Suzuki's made the back look almost identical to the current Qashqai's. So there's that. But in fairness, there is a lot of charm here, and I happen to think that this is a lot more fun to drive than the Qashqai, and most other crossovers for that matter. The best way of putting it is that it feels and behaves like a fat Suzuki Swift. Now, if you haven't driven a Swift, that statement is completely useless to you. So what I mean by that is that where the Swift has this sense of like almost natural roughness around the edges, this has the same thing. It makes you want to say words like organic. The steering is a perfect example, right? It doesn't feel like it's assisted even though it is. So it's really light around the middle, but then it weights up the more you turn. It's progressive. You get more inertia the more you turn the wheel. It just makes it feel really nice. Now, it's a bit rolly, and usually I would criticize that quality, but here it sort of adds to the appeal somehow. It kind of works, and it's mainly because it makes the car more comfy because there's more give in the suspension. There's just something about the way this is set up and the way that it rolls that adds to the overall feel of the car and gives it that like old school fun to drive quality. I'm just going to drive this a bit and just show you. You see, it rolls a lot, but you always sort of know what's happening. And it's one of those cars that you can get to make skiddy noises without being terrified that something dreadful is about to happen. Listen. It's evocative of much older cars, but in a really charming sort of a way, because you get that combination of like body roll, but sort of natural feel. Now, in exchange for that, you do then have to deal with slightly uncouth ride quality. It is quite bouncy. It's not jarring or crashy, so you would never say it was uncomfortable, but it just never feels like it quite settles down. A more modern crossover like a Qashqai or a Peugeot 3008 or a Mazda CX-30, they just seem to have this more sophisticated sense of balance. They seem to deal with the outside world while keeping the body much more level than this does. You also have to deal with a driving position that's old school, and it's not bad. Like, I'm 6'4" and I'm comfortable in it, but you feel like you're sat on top of the car rather than down into it. The benefit of that, of course, is that you get great visibility because you can see right down in front of you. It's really easy to see the end of the bonnet. The pillars are quite thin. There's lots of glass. So this feels like quite a small car around you. It's not going to be difficult to park or anything, but it could maybe do with a little bit more adjustment. I'd like the seat to be maybe 6 inches lower and the steering wheel to come out a little bit more. Not a big deal, but just another example of how this feels slightly old. There are no fundamental problems with the basics though. Even things like the way the gearbox feels, it's light but it's solid. The way the pedals feel, same thing. There's nothing to actually complain about. There's just a lot of things that you wish they'd done slightly better. Switchgear that increasingly feels like it's from a bygone era. The heated seats are on these massive oblong rocker switches that turn on and off like a crap light switch. And the whole interior just feels a bit dark and like it was cobbled together with perfunctory usefulness rather than with any sort of design flair. There's a token swathe of soft touch material on the dash at the passenger side, but the rest of it's just like hard-ass Japan by numbers. But it is practical and it's pretty cheap. It's very practical actually. Big door pockets with a picture of a bottle on them so that you can remember to drink lots of water. Also, big basic glove box, lots of headroom, obviously, plenty of rear leg space, and also a boot.
Makes me wonder what it's all about. A boot.
And if the tailgate has a hint of the Nissan Qashqai about it, well, what do you know? Lift the tailgate and beneath it is an identical amount of space to a Qashqai. The SX4's boot is a pleasant array of convenience features. We're talking twin level boot floor, compartments down the side, hooks, stuff like that. Cost then. So to stay with this Qashqai theme, we can look at the starting price of both and we can see that the SX4 starts a little lower than the Qashqai does. And what I can also tell you is that right now, as I'm stood here, you can actually pick up an SX4 from about 15,500, which is loads of space for not really that much money. Also, I can tell you that every SX4 comes with a good set of basics: alloys, aircon, Bluetooth, digital radio. But what's most telling is that you can have an SX4 with this setup for that price. So that's a bells and whistles job with 4-wheel drive, an automatic gearbox and a decent petrol engine. A whole lot of car basically. Now by contrast, to get a Qashqai with 4-wheel drive, you have to spend that much. And Nissan doesn't even give you the option of 4-wheel drive with a petrol engine, it has to be a diesel. And that's where the real value is with the Suzuki, that you can get tons of car for well under £30,000. And very safe car at that, because the good people at Euro NCAP awarded this 5 stars with really good scores across the board. Also, this 1.4 turbo petrol engine is another reason why this car is such good fun to drive. It's just really suited to the character of the car. It's not especially quick and it's a bit noisy when you push it, but it feels really flexible because it's got loads of torque at the low end. And if you're not pushing it, it's really quiet. Having said that, the economy's not brilliant. You'll probably get mid-30s around the doors. There's a diesel if you're doing bigger mileages and you want better tank range, or there's a smaller 3-cylinder petrol engine that gives you even better economy than the 1.4, but because I haven't driven it, I wouldn't like to churn out assumptions by saying things like it's going to sound better, it's going to be a bit slow, but it might just be the sweet spot of the range. Wouldn't want to do that at all. Overall though, and I know I keep saying it, but I really do like driving this car. And I think the reason I'm saying it so much is because I like it much more than I thought I would. For example, I happen to be running a Volkswagen T-Roc at the moment. So, you know, similar sort of car, similar size. And it's been really interesting getting out of this and going into that. Speak of the devil, there it is. The T-Roc feels much more refined, it's got a much better driving position, it's designed better, the infotainment's much better. Generally just feels like a much more modern take on the same sort of thing. But after driving this, when I went back to driving that, I couldn't help but think about how much more fun this is to actually drive. The other thing to say about that is the T-Roc is much more refined than this. If this has old school driving charm, it also has old school refinement. The wind noise is pretty bad. There's quite a lot of tyre noise here and you can hear the suspension working at lower speeds. It has a layer or two of refinement stripped away compared to a more modern feeling crossover like a Qashqai or a T-Roc. Rough and ready and big and well priced. If that's what you want, here it is. Thanks for watching. If you want to know more about this, including stuff about the 3-cylinder engine and the diesel and the 4-wheel drive system, there is tons of stuff on this car over at the HJ website. I'll put some links below. Please leave a like and a comment or a complaint or a question below. Anything you want, really. Next week, we're doing something far more modern, you'll be pleased to know. It's an Audi e-tron, which I'm genuinely looking forward to trying. Come back for that. I'll see you soon. Bye. Oh, I'm about to knock over a cock. Move out the way, cock. Seriously, cock, move out the way. Seriously, no, you're not gonna. There we go. It's a problem with doing these things in the country.